The most famous woman in country music spent 60 years married to a man almost no one ever saw. He went to one of her concerts once. He let himself be photographed, only with a bag over his head. When she walked the red carpet, he stayed home. And yet this quiet man, an asphalt paver from Nashville who never wanted a single moment of her spotlight, was the love of Dolly Parton's life, the man behind her most famous songs, and the reason, in the end, she may not have wanted to stay in this world without him. For 60 years, she kept it hidden. Subscribe before we start so you don't miss any of our lookbacks. To understand the love story, you have to go back to the very beginning, to the first hour of the rest of her life. It was 1964. A girl named Dolly Parton, just 18 years old, fresh off the bus from the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee, had come to Nashville with everything she owned in a set of matching luggage made of cardboard. She had big dreams and almost no money, and on her very first day in the city, she took her dirty clothes to a laundromat called the Wishy-Washy. She was standing outside waiting on her wash when a young man drove by in a car. His name was Carl Dean. He was 21, quiet, tall, and he took one look at the pretty blonde girl on the sidewalk and, as he later told it, his first thought was, "I'm going to marry that girl." His second thought was, "Lord, she is good looking." Now, Dolly Parton had been looked at by men her whole life, but she noticed something about Carl Dean right away, something that made him different from every other man who ever whistled at her. She said it herself years later, and it tells you everything about why she fell for him. While he was talking to me, she remembered, he looked at my face, a rare thing for me. He seemed genuinely interested in finding out who I was and what I was about. Think about that. Here was a young woman the whole world would one day stare at, and the man she married was the one man who looked her in the eye. He wanted to know her heart, not just her figure. In that one moment outside a Nashville laundromat, Dolly Parton met the person who would stand beside her for the next 60 years. They did not rush it. Just after they met, Carl had a commitment to the Army National Guard, so he went off and served his time. And here's where you learn something about how real this was. For about 2 years, while Carl was away, the two of them kept the flame alive the old-fashioned way through letters and long-distance devotion, in a time long before cell phones and video calls. A lesser romance would have faded. Theirs deepened. When Carl finally came home, there was never any question. He courted her properly. He took her to meet nobody's approval but her own family's, and before long they were engaged. There was just one problem. Dolly's record company did not want her getting married. A single girl singer was easier to sell, they thought, and they worried that a wedding would hurt her budding career. So Dolly and Carl did what they would keep doing for the rest of their lives together. They kept it private. On the 30th of May, 1966, on Memorial Day, they drove across the state line to Ringgold, Georgia, and got married in a tiny ceremony in a preacher's office. The only witness was Dolly's mother. There was no crowd, no press, no fanfare, just a young couple, deeply in love, quietly promising each other forever. Dolly wore a little white dress she had made herself. It was the beginning of one of the longest and most devoted marriages in the history of show business, and almost nobody knew it had even happened. Now, to understand why this marriage mattered so much to her, you have to understand where Dolly Parton came from. She was born in a tiny log cabin in the mountains of East Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children, in a family so poor that her father paid the doctor who delivered her with a sack of cornmeal. They had no running water, no electricity. She grew up dirt poor, wearing clothes made from feed sacks, in a holler where dreams did not come easy. Her famous song, "Coat of Many Colors," about a little coat her mother sewed together from rags, was the true story of her childhood. So when that mountain girl came to Nashville and found a man who loved her for exactly who she was, poverty and dreams and all, it meant more than any amount of fame ever could. Carl knew where she came from. He never treated her like a star. He treated her like the girl from the holler, which is all she ever really was underneath the wigs and the rhinestones. And it is worth remembering that when they married, Dolly Parton was not yet Dolly Parton. She was a hopeful young singer with a few small songs to her name and a mountain of doubt to overcome. Nobody knew yet that she would become one of the most famous women on the planet. Carl did not marry a superstar. He married a poor, determined girl who believed in herself when almost nobody else did, and he believed in her too. In those early years, they had very little. She was grinding away, trying to break into a business that told her over and over that her voice was too high and too strange and would never sell. Through all of it, Carl was the one steady thing. He worked his paving job, he came home to her, and he told her to keep going. When the whole world eventually fell in love with Dolly Parton, Carl had already been in love with her for years, back when she was nobody at all. That is the kind of love you cannot buy with any amount of success. From the very start, the two of them wanted completely different things out of life, and somehow that became the secret to their success. Dolly wanted the stage, the lights, the whole wide world. Carl wanted his home, his land, and his peace. He ran an asphalt paving company in Nashville, laying down roads and driveways, an honest man doing honest work, and he had absolutely no interest in becoming Mr. Dolly Parton. He made that clear early. After going with her to one single awards show, Carl reportedly told his wife, "I love you, and I will support you in your career any way I can. But I am not going to any more of these wingdings." And he never did. In 60 years of marriage, Carl Dean saw his wife perform live only a handful of times, by some accounts just once. When her movie 9 to 5 premiered and made her a Hollywood star, Carl skipped the premiere. He watched the movie later by himself in a regular theater, like any other man buying a ticket. When Dollywood opened, there was not a single photograph of him anywhere in the park. He was so private that on the rare occasion he agreed to be in a picture, he joked that he would only do it with a paper bag over his head. To the outside world, it looked strange. How could the most visible woman in America be married to a man who was practically invisible? But to Dolly and Carl, it made perfect sense. He was her anchor, the still, quiet center of a life that was otherwise a hurricane of fame. She could fly all over the world, be adored by millions, and then come home to a man who did not care about any of that, who just loved her, Dolly Rebecca Parton, the girl from the mountains. He kept her grounded, he kept her real, and he kept her his. And do not picture Carl Dean as some dull, silent figure in the background. By all of Dolly's accounts, he was funny, sharp, and full of surprises. Here is a detail that tells you everything. Carl Dean was a rock and roll man. He loved hard, loud, electric rock music. In fact, when Dolly recorded her very first rock album late in her career, well into her 70s, she said she made it largely for Carl because he had spent a lifetime playing that music around the house and she wanted to give him something he loved. Most of those songs, she said, she chose because of him, because he knew good music. Imagine that. The queen of country music making a rock record as a love letter to her husband. That was the kind of quiet, everyday devotion that ran through 60 years of marriage. She was always, in some small way, doing things for Carl. Their home life was famously ordinary, and they liked it that way. She would come off a world tour, having sung for tens of thousands of screaming fans, and walk back into a house where she was just a wife. She cooked for him. She has said that some of her happiest moments were simple mornings at home, making Carl his breakfast, the two of them talking about nothing in particular. The whole planet wanted a piece of Dolly Parton. Carl just wanted her company. And that, more than the fame or the fortune, was the life she treasured most. There was one more thing this couple shared that few people know about. Dolly and Carl never had children of their own. It was a private sorrow, one Dolly rarely spoke about in detail, though she hinted over the years that it simply was not in God's plan for them. But instead of letting that break their hearts, they poured all that love somewhere else. They helped raise several of Dolly's younger brothers and sisters, bringing them to Nashville and giving them a home. The children called her Aunt Granny, and later, that same longing to give something to children she would never have poured out into the whole world through her Imagination Library, a program that has now mailed hundreds of millions of free books to children everywhere. The couple who had no children of their own ended up nurturing millions of them. That was Carl and Dolly too, quietly, without fanfare, doing good. And here's something most people never realize. That private marriage, the one Dolly kept hidden from the world, gave us some of the most famous songs she ever wrote. The love story you never saw is hiding inside the music you know by heart. Take Jolene. It is one of the most beloved and most covered songs in all of music. The desperate plea of a woman begging a beautiful redhead not to take her man. For years, people wondered where such raw jealousy came from. Well, Dolly finally told the truth. It came from Carl. Early in their marriage, there was a bank teller, a gorgeous young woman with red hair, who took a shine to Carl Dean. And Carl, being human, rather enjoyed the attention. He started finding lots of reasons to go down to the bank. Dolly noticed. She used to tease him, saying, "I don't believe we've got that kind of money, so why are you spending so much time at that bank?" It was innocent, and they laughed about it for years. But Dolly took that little flicker of worry, that tiny fear of losing the man she loved, and she turned it into Jolene. Her marriage did not just survive that moment, it became immortal because of it. And here is the part that will stop you cold. Dolly Parton wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You on the very same day. Two of the greatest songs in American history, written in a single afternoon, and both of them, in their own way, born out of her love for Carl Dean. One about the fear of losing love, the other, the most beautiful goodbye song ever written. He was the quiet man behind both. Now, I Will Always Love You has its own story. Dolly first wrote it as a goodbye to her mentor Porter Wagner when she left his television show to go out on her own, a professional farewell wrapped in tenderness. Years later, Whitney Houston would turn it into one of the best-selling songs of all time, and it made Dolly a fortune. But listen to those words again now that you know about Carl. If I should stay, I would only be in your way, and I will always love you. Whatever the song was written about, it became, in the end, the truest thing Dolly Parton could have said to the man she loved for 60 years. She sang goodbye to the whole world for a living, but there was only ever one person she truly could not say goodbye to, and in the end, she did not have to wait long to see him again. The years rolled on, and while Hollywood marriages crumbled all around them, Dolly and Carl only grew stronger. People always asked her the secret. How does a marriage last this long, especially in show business? Dolly had a simple answer. She said the secret was to stay gone a little. We're not in each other's face all the time, she explained. He's not in the business, so we have different interests, but we have the things we love to do together. They would sneak away in an old camper van, just the two of them. No makeup, no wigs, no cameras, and drive around like a couple of ordinary sweethearts. Sometimes they would pull into a fast food parking lot and split a meal and just talk. The queen of country music and her road-paving husband, happy as could be, completely unknown to the people in the next car over. She loved to tell the story of how they would sit in that camper and Carl would tease her, keep her humble, never once let the fame go to her head. He had a dry, quick wit that matched her own. When the tabloids would run their wild rumors over the decades, claiming the marriage was fake, or that Carl did not really exist because nobody ever saw him, the two of them just laughed. They knew the truth, and the truth was nobody's business but theirs. In a town built on publicity, where stars paraded their romances for the cameras, Dolly and Carl guarded their love like the most precious thing they owned. Because it was. But it would be a lie to tell you it was always easy, and Dolly herself was too honest to pretend that it was. In the early 1980s, she went through the darkest stretch of her whole life. Her health broke down, and she had to step back from her career. And in the middle of all that pain and exhaustion, she admitted years later, her heart got pulled towards someone else. She called it an affair of the heart, a deep emotional attachment to another man, and she said it just about tore her apart. It was the closest their marriage ever came to breaking. But here's the thing, it did not break. Dolly and Carl loved each other enough to hold on through the hardest test a marriage can face. She came home to him, she chose him. And she said something afterward that says it all. There ain't a man in this world, she said, could ever live up to my husband. That's one of the things that keeps me from going too far. They came out the other side of that storm stronger than ever, and they never looked back. A perfect fairy tale would have been a nice story. What Dolly and Carl had was better, because it was real, it was tested, and it held. In 2016, Dolly and Carl celebrated 50 years of marriage, and Dolly, being Dolly, decided that the tiny wedding they had back in 1966, the one with only her mother watching, deserved a do-over. So they renewed their vows. This time she got the big white dress and the ceremony she never had. They took beautiful photographs together, the two of them, gray-haired now, but still sweethearts, still laughing, 50 years down the road from that laundromat. It was one of the only times the world ever got to see them together, and you could see it in their faces. After half a century, they were still crazy about each other, but no love story, no matter how strong, gets to last forever. On the 3rd of March, 2025, Carl Dean died. He was 82 years old. After nearly 60 years, the quiet man who had stood beside Dolly through all of it was gone. And for the first time in her adult life, Dolly Parton was alone. She announced it herself in a simple, dignified message, the same way they had always done things. Carl Dean, husband of Dolly Parton, passed away in Nashville, she wrote. He would be laid to rest in a private ceremony with only immediate family attending. Private to the very end, just the way he had lived. And then she added the words that broke the hearts of everyone who read them. Carl and I spent many wonderful years together, she said. Words can't do justice to the love we shared for over 60 years. Think about what that loss meant for her. This was not a marriage of a few years. Carl Dean had been beside Dolly Parton for practically her entire adult existence. He had been there before the first hit record, before the movies, before Dollywood, before she became a household name in every corner of the earth. He was the one constant thread running through the whole tapestry of her extraordinary life. Every triumph she ever had, she came home and told Carl about. Every heartache he helped her carry. To lose him was to lose the one person who had known her, truly known her, from the very beginning. It was like losing a piece of her own history, a witness to her whole life. She was heartbroken, but she did what she had always done with her pain. She turned it into a song. Just days after Carl passed, Dolly released a new recording, a tender, aching tribute to her husband. She called it, If You Hadn't Been There. If you hadn't been there, she sang, where would I be? Without your trust, love, and belief. It was a thank you, sung across the veil, to the man who had believed in a poor mountain girl before the whole world ever did. And the words she wrote to go along with it may be the most beautiful thing she ever said. I fell in love with Carl Dean when I was 18 years old, she told her fans. We have spent 60 precious and meaningful years together. Like all great love stories, they never end. They live on in memory and song. He will always be the star of my life story. He will always be the star of my life story. Read that again. The most celebrated entertainer in the world, a woman adored by millions, said that the real star was the quiet man nobody ever saw. After Carl died, those close to Dolly said something in her seemed to change. The spark was still there, the humor, the warmth, but a piece of her had gone with him. In the months that followed, she began to slow down in a way the tireless Dolly Parton never had before. She postponed concerts. She canceled appearances. She spoke of health troubles she had always powered right through in the past. Her first birthday without Carl, her 80th, came and went in January, and for the first time in nearly 60 years, he was not there for it. Through it all, she leaned on the faith she had carried since she was a little girl singing in her grandfather's Pentecostal church. She spoke openly about heaven, about seeing Carl again, about being ready whenever the Lord decided to call her home. She was not afraid. She had already lived a life bigger and brighter than any mountain girl could have dreamed. She had given the world her songs, her joy, her endless generosity. She had nothing left to prove and nothing left to fear. The only thing missing was the one person who had been by her side since she was 18 years old, and the other half of her heart was already waiting for her on the other side. And then, just about a year and a half after she lost Carl, on the 25th of August, 2026, Dolly Parton died. She was 80 years old, and her family said she passed away peacefully after a brief battle with cancer, surrounded by the people she loved. After a lifetime of being the brightest light in any room, she slipped away quietly, and went to rejoin the one man who had never needed her to be a star at all. The whole world stopped to mourn her. Tributes poured in from presidents and movie stars and millions of ordinary people who had grown up on her songs. Flags were lowered, fans gathered outside her Nashville home and at Dollywood, leaving flowers and singing her songs through their tears. She was remembered as a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a tireless giver, a woman who had lifted up the poor and taught children to read and never once forgot where she came from. All of that was true, and all of it was worthy of the tears. But there was another story running quietly underneath all the headlines about her career that far fewer people were telling. It was the story of a woman who had, at long last, gone home to her husband. For 18 lonely months, half of her had been missing. Now, if you believe as she did, they were together again at last, the singer and the paver, reunited on the far side of all this. Stop and think about what this love actually was, because in an age when so few things seem to last, it is almost hard to believe. 60 years, 6 decades with the same person, from a teenage girl outside a laundromat to an 80-year-old legend saying her final goodbye. They were together longer than most people are alive. They started with nothing and ended with everything, and through all of it, the fame, the fortune, the temptations, the hard years, the tabloids, the distance, they held on to each other. Dolly Parton could have had any man in the world. She chose a quiet road paver from Nashville, and she never once regretted it. That is not a Hollywood romance. That is the real thing. The kind of love our parents and grandparents understood. The kind you promise in front of God and then spend a lifetime keeping. And maybe that is the real reason this story matters so much to the people who loved her. Dolly Parton gave the world so much. But the greatest love story she ever told was not in any of her songs. It was the one she lived, quietly, off camera, for 60 faithful years. There is one final haunting piece to this story. Years ago, Dolly recorded a secret song and sealed it inside a time capsule, with instructions that it not be opened until the year 2045, on what would have been her 99th birthday. Nobody has heard it, nobody will for another 20 years. She once admitted it drove her half crazy, writing a song that she would never hear played, that most people alive when she made it might never hear at all. So somewhere out there, locked away in the dark, Dolly Parton's true last song is still waiting. A message from a woman who is already gone, patiently keeping one final secret, just like she and Carl kept their love a secret for all those years. They met outside a laundromat when she was 18. They loved each other quietly for 60 years, and in the end, within a year and a half of each other, they were gone. The singer the whole world knew, and the one man she wanted all to herself. Like she said, the great love stories never really end. They just live on, in memory and in song. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.